Morning, everyone. Well, thanks for joining our latest webinar on mobility scooters. And I think we should probably make a start. Really appreciate you're given the time to join today. Please feel free in the usual way to use the chat, introduce yourselves, put any points, questions and things that you might have for Andy. We'll keep the mics muted until we get to the Q&A session. So big thanks to Andy for giving his time today to tell us more about the proposed changes to the mobility scooter guidance from the National Fire Chiefs Council. There's a consultation which is out, which is closing on Monday. So apologies for the very short notice, but it's the only sort of slot we can squeeze in. We wanted to get that message out and give opportunity for as many people as possible to actually respond to that. Just the wider sort of picture around e-mobility and lithium-ion batteries. As you all know, this is a rapidly emerging risk, and in a sense, the sort of regulatory side of things is struggling perhaps to keep up with the way things are developing. It's a rapidly evolving picture. There's simple things that we can do as landlords and building managers to identify and assess risks and mitigate them as much as possible. So, Andy, thank you for joining us today, and look forward to hearing what you've got to share with us.
Brilliant. Thanks, Nigel. Welcome, everyone, to the session this morning. Really good to see so many people on the call. And I was going to talk through a little bit around the consultation. Obviously, we're coming towards the end of it now, but we wanted to sort of get the webinar on the call. Obviously, I would encourage anyone to, if you've got any comments, to respond to the consultation before Monday. But if not, please pop comments on the chat. Or feedback when we go through the Q&A. And if you don't have time to respond, it's important that I understand and hear people's views on that, so that I can try and represent everyone when we have those follow-up conversations once the consultation is closed. So I'll just walk through some slides, and then I'll turn the slides off so I can see everyone on the screen, and we can have a bit of a Q&A and chip in at that point. So a bit of background. About 10 years ago, lots of landlords, building owners, housing associations had lots of issues with mobility scooters. There was a lot of talk back then of, what are you doing about it? How do you manage it? They were on escape routes up and down the country. Fire and rescue services were issuing notices of deficiencies regularly on it. And there needed to be a bit of clarity around how could we balance the risk of mobility scooters on escape routes versus making sure that we can consider the independence of individuals, because residents might have a medical condition that might restrict their mobility, and this was a sort of critical piece of equipment for them. But as we know, existing buildings weren't designed to cater for this type of equipment. So whilst we can tackle and think about that from a new build point of view, that's going to take years to sort of establish into buildings in the future. So that, it was a real challenge on how to tackle that. But back then, back in sort of 2018, we had lots of conversations with lots of providers. We joined up with a number of fire and rescue services, Greater Manchester, Staffordshire, and the NFCC, to sort of pull together some standard guidance that people can follow. And things have moved on now. We're 7 years down the track since the guidance was issued. We see lots of great sort of policies organisations have adopted. It isn't the topic of conversation these days. I think e-bikes and e-scooters tend to be the sort of emerging conversation, or fire doors, or things like that. So it's good to see that people picked up the guidance, adopted it, had those conversations with residents, made those buildings safer as a result. And whilst we can't eliminate that risk, there's been some really positive steps to sort of engage residents in that process and to make sure that they are being stored safely. So 7 years now, things have moved on. A number of things in the guidance no longer relevant, they're out of date. We are seeing more use of lithium-ion batteries. The technology is advancing significantly. We're seeing more and more devices with lithium-ion batteries in them. E-bikes, e-scooters, we're seeing conversion kits. Similar with mobility scooters, so the battery tech is advancing. We know that there's an older population, because the demographic is typically older people will be susceptible and require mobility scooters. That is going to increase. We know from the National Office of Statistics that the population is aging, that there will be more older people in the population over the next 10 to 15 years. So there's a real challenge there in terms of, as we get older, as people's health deteriorate, how are we going to keep pace with making sure that we can keep people safe in buildings as that increases over time? But there's also an opportunity really to share some of that good practice. So I've got some links at the end of the slides just to we set up an email address. So if you've been doing some really fantastic stuff and you want to share that, please send that over to us, or examples of it, and happy to have a conversation with anyone. And we will look to pull that together and we'll share that through the Fire Safety and Housing website, through membership, and get that out to people so that people can see what others have done really to sort of do that. And it ultimately is about improving the standards really to make sure that we can ensure resident safety in purpose-built blocks of flats, really. So I'm going to talk through some of the key changes. In the original guidance, we estimated through tests that were carried out that it would take around 3 minutes or just over 3 minutes for a mobility scooter to impact the escape route, through incidents that have occurred and through other information. Research done by the National Fire Chiefs Council suggests that's now below 3 minutes. And I've just seen a comment pop up about slides. Yes, we'll definitely share the slides after, so please don't worry about taking notes. Hopefully that helps. Also, within the guidance, we've also clarified that the guidance does not constitute Article 50 guidance. And for those that don't know, Article 50 is part of the Regulatory Reform Fire Safety Order that sort of sets a legal precedent on guidance that's published. Effectively, if you follow Article 50 guidance, then you are likely to be complying with the Fire Safety Order. So this guidance isn't written under Article 50. However, the point I would try to make here is that there is no Article 50 guidance on mobility scooter storage. So in the absence of any Article 50 guidance, this guide it will act as that sort of industry-led guidance. So, from a legal point of view, if an incident occurred and you're in court, the likelihood is the courts would look at this guidance as prescribed information on how you could comply with the law. Obviously, I'm not a lawyer, so you would probably need to sort of take legal advice on that. But fundamentally, we just wanted to clarify that it wasn't written under Article 50 of the Fire Safety Order, but in the absence of any other guidance, it should help you to comply with the requirements. There are a number of other changes that have been sort of added. So there's going to be some images added to the guidance just as a visual representation. Again, it's not been formatted correctly, but we just wanted people to focus on the content. In case there's any changes that were needed, or through the efforts that you've been taking to manage the risk, if there's anything new that we need to think about, then that was the purpose, really, just to sort of make those changes. And there are a number of technical updates on heat release rates in terms of the heat that's generated when a mobility scooter catches fire, and other issues like toxic smoke being generated, and also the risks associated with thermal runaway. We know this is a big issue with e-bikes and e-scooters, but in some situations, when thermal runaway occurs, that can create what's called a vapor cloud. Now that looks and feels like smoke, but it's not. It's really flammable. It's very toxic. It gives off lots of different gases. And so if people try and tackle the fire in that situation, they could become overcome with that and become incapacitated. But also there's an explosion risk there as well. And we've seen a number of instances where that has occurred. So really sort of important. I think the other point I'd like to sort of mention about this is that, we're talking worst case scenario here, that, if a lithium ion battery goes into thermal runaway, or if a mobility scooter catches fire, the risks are low, but they are present, they are there. And we all know that AWAB's law came in recently around damp and mould. We know governments are planning to extend all the hazards under the health and safety rating system in due course. We know fire and explosion will come into force effectively from next year. Some consideration needs to be given to ensuring how can we sort of minimise that risk, but how will that sort of feed into the rollout of AWAB's law as well. So just something to be aware of. Now, as you might remember, for those that have used the guidance, there were a number of options available. There was about 6 options. External storage, internal storage. Not one option was preferred. It was more of a pit list, really, of when you're looking at your building, these might be some of the options, and you could then effectively risk assess and take the right option that was suitable for your building, for your residents. So there are some changes to those options, where before there was a paragraph in around compensatory measures. That's now been removed, and some of the options have been expanded upon. That sort of, it uses language like you should do this or you should do that. Doesn't mean that you have to, but we think that because the guidance has been out now for about 8 years, we do need to sort of embed the sort of real sort of principles of fire prevention into those options. But obviously, in reality, some of that might not be realistic. Certainly in existing buildings, so if we're talking about some of the guidance that says around, you should only have storage on the ground floor with external access, then and smoke extraction systems and sort of suppression systems, sprinklers, things like that. Then the reality is that in some buildings we've just been using sort of storage areas that have got a fire door on them and a detector within them. It's going to be really sort of difficult to sort of embed that smoke extraction or retrofit water suppression. So they are options. It's about sort of thinking about the long term. Really, this is really about shaping that. But I know that there's challenges there. So it'd be really good to get people's feedback on that. National Fire Chiefs Council were really sort of pushing that angle, and I get it. I completely understand with the principle in terms of fire prevention, but we also need to be pragmatic as well about where we can store scooters safely, and sort of good practice really around that. So so if you're looking at the guidance, focusing on the options and just look at those options, because that'd be key really. And then lastly, we had an appendix that was relevant for tenant information. Now, a lot of the information contained within that is no longer accurate now. So most of that's been removed, and in reality, there wasn't much left in that section. So what we decided to do this time was take that appendix out, but replace it with some case studies of where there's been incidents and learning from that. So again, we're asking for people to sort of share any good practice that they've done. We can then sort of revisit those case studies and upgrade them, and that'll help other people out, but we'll also make that information available to members and to others, obviously assuming we have permission to do so from the organisations that shared that information. But it's about sort of learning and sharing what that looks like. Now, when I talked about heat release rates a little bit, this was a graph that we were toying around putting in the guidance. I can't remember if it's been put in or not, but it was just a sort of an example of when we talk about a mobility scooter fire, we're talking about when it catches fire, the heat that can get generated from it can be up to 2,500 kilowatts in terms of heat. So the reality is that we put some examples of what that looks like in terms of, related to other fires. So we always used to say that it was similar to a small vehicle fire, so, if you had a Corsa fully loaded with fuel on fire, that would generate the same sort of heat the mobility scooter fire would. But what was also important was that typically we used to tend to see 2 or 3 scooters together, and we'd store them together. So, that the problem you have then is that if one scooter can generate 2.5 kilowatts of fire, then that exponentially increases as it transfers to other mobility scooters. So you can imagine the intensity of fire in that scenario. So it was really important to think about extraction, certainly from a firefighting point of view. That was a concern for firefighters, because if they haven't got that external access, or there isn't smoke extraction, then the reality is when they start to tackle those fires, that will impede the escape routes as they're trying to tackle the fire. So again, it's something to think about, but just I thought it'd be useful just to sort of share that to give some comparisons of the heat generated on a mobility scooter. So just to sort of get into those options, it was mainly around the internal storage options There's an introduction of a preferred requirement that it should be ground floor level only and access from the outside. I get that. That's fine for new build because you can design that in. It's really difficult for existing buildings to sort of do that, especially where you've got sort of low to medium rise buildings with people on top floor, second floor. It's really challenging to do that. You know, we have to think about the resident as well, you know, in terms of their mobility, you know, because if it's just on the ground floor, then there was always the issue of how does the resident get from the storage area to their flat, etc. So obviously it's been put into the guidance, but again, more around firefighting operations, really. But you know, it's just something to be aware of. The automatic smoke extraction, venting to outside, as I've already picked upon, and obviously water suppression, highly recommended as well. Again, given the heat release rates around scooter fires, important to think about automatic water suppression. There is also the restriction of charging at night. That was already in the guidance. But again, just sort of reaffirming that, you know, we're seeing quite a lot of that. You know, when we think about e-bikes and e-scooters, for example, whilst we're talking about mobility scooters today, I did have a conversation with National Fire Teachers Council because a lot of the principles around storage and charging in the guidance can and should apply to approaches around e-bikes and e-scooters. You know, so it is very much about, we're seeing incidents where there's been a number of fatalities where people have been charging at night, leaving it on the hallway. We have those issues with mobility scooters too, especially if residents were storing them in their own property. We needed to make sure that they weren't on their only escape route, for example. And lastly, some change into the wording around the fire detection, that in those situations that it does need to be linked to a alarm receiving centre. You know, typically we're dealing with older people, therefore we need to think about how people can raise the alarm and making sure that fire detection is linked to a third-party alarm receiving centre. As I said, compensatory measures have now been removed to reflect those changes. And we've also updated the management arrangement section to cover the requirements under the Building Safety Act for high-risk buildings and the requirement to report certain types of incidents through your mandatory occurrence reporting mechanism. So we just wanted to sort of reflect that in the guidance as well, since the Building Safety Act has come out. So just to reaffirm, deadline is Monday at 9 a.m. And there are a number of links on here. We'll send the slides out afterwards. You've got the link directly to the online survey. That's the preferred option. When you go through the online survey, there's about 10 questions for sort of each section of the guidance. So I'd strongly recommend downloading the guide first, have a read through, and then complete the survey. But if you have any difficulties with accessing it, there's an email address there for the National Fire Chiefs who will be able to help with any access issues. And there's an email address there, scooters@shfsg.info, for any good practice to be shared, and we'll pick that up and feed that in to the consultation responses on that. So that's all the information I wanted to share. And obviously now I'll stop sharing. And back to you, Nigel, really, just in terms of if anyone has any questions, pick anything up in the chat.
Thank you, Andy. That's really helpful. So we do have 1 or 2 questions starting to come in the chat, so thank you for that. But please also feel free to pop your hand up if you want to pose your questions and comments and observations live. The first one is a question whether this is applying to electric wheelchairs. Andy, can you give us a view on that, please.
Well, electric wheelchairs. What was that? Sorry, what was the question? Just in terms of what the view was.
Whether it's within scope, whether it's within scope of the guidance.
Well, electric wheelchairs are class one vehicles, effectively. Principles are the same. I mean, technically, it's not in scope. We excluded wheelchairs really in the guidance. So, you know, it is mainly geared at class 2 and class 3 vehicles. But you know, even though those are not in scope, you know, it's about applying the principles of the guidance really, and being pragmatic about that. You know, making sure that the equipment's being used, it's being maintained by a reputable supplier, etc. That it's not overeating, you know, those types of issues really. So, you know, it's just being pragmatic about that.
Thank you for that. As it is also fair to say that the powered chairs are sold under in the UK under sort of tighter controls, tighter legislation, than mobility scooters. Is that true?
Yeah, well, they're more of a medical device. Even though scooters are technically classed as a medical device, they're not necessarily treated in the same way because different legislation applies. You know, so like class 3, for example, you know, departments of transport, you know, requirements, so yeah, so it does vary slightly, but same principles apply, I think.
Yeah, excellent. So there's a question which probably bears on or relates to your comment about implementing, you know, what was solutions which are reasonably practicable, you know, through, you know, given the building and the conditions, the circumstances you've got, and that's relating to a sprinkler system for an external area if the apartment lacks sprinklers. Interesting one, because you know, a lot of buildings, general needs particularly, don't have sprinklers. I suppose two questions I'd sort of pose from this. One is, if it's stored externally, is suppression required? And that may relate to distance from building and building fabric and other things. What would you say about that, Andy?
Yeah, I think the suppression was mainly geared at internal storage. So yeah, I'd say that would be excluded at this point based on the guidance. You know, because there'd obviously be different challenges there, wouldn't there, depending on the location of the external storage, for example. And because it's out away from the building, you know, that can be managed differently. It's just making sure the location has been adequately risk assessed, so it doesn't impede on evacuation.
Yeah, I think that risk assessment is critical, isn't it? Because you can make sort of broad brush recommendations, but everything needs a detailed risk assessment to be carried out. If it's closer to the building, you might look at it and say, yeah, look, that does actually need additional suppression to, you know, for us to feel comfortable with that, or the assessor to feel comfortable with that. Martin, do you want to come with a question now?
Yes, thank you. Martin Jenick from Kensington and Chelsea Council. I found that graph really interesting when it starts talking about the actual heat being produced and the energy. And I suppose if you were to store something inside an internal unit, is there any guidance on maybe any recommendations on how many, say, electric scooters can be stored in a room? Is there any commentary on that?
Hi, Martin. Thanks for the question. There isn't. What we tended to sort of say was that once you were exceeding more than sort of 3 scooters in a room in close proximity, then you know, that would obviously increase the heat generated. But the principles were that as long as the storage was in a 60-minute compartment, with a good fire door with detection and extraction ideally, then that would sort of help to mitigate the impact on the escape routes. Really.
Perfect. Thank you.
Do you think it's important to sort of add into that, Andy, is that if part of the risk assessment and process identifies that the devices do have lithium-ion batteries as opposed to a more traditional, lead-acid battery, then that behaviour could be quite different. And some of the traditional ways of dealing with this, i.e., fire door, plasterboard walls, or something like this, may not actually be capable of containing a lithium-ion or thermal runaway event. Is that a point that we should note, do you think? And also the toxic vapor cloud, if that's spreading within the building, that could be a really serious hazard.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously, when the guidance was written, it was very much we had lots of mobility scooters on escape routes up and down the country, so we needed to sort of do something about that. So the guidance was coming from that point of view about maintaining the escape route was clear and free from those hazards. But the technology is changing, lithium ions developing. The reality is that if the worst happens, when we've got a lithium ion battery in a scooter that's been tampered with or damaged, absolutely, that's going to have a huge impact. And ideally, if it's behind the door, for a period of time, that allows people to get out if they need to get out, around that. So
excellent. Thanks, Andy. Craig Thomas, want to come in there with a contribution?
Craig Thomas, the project team at Ashford Borough Council. At the moment, I have a 4-storey project made up of M423 flats in Ashford, Kent. I have put just over a 2-metre square enclosure, fire rated, outside the front door of each flat. So it's on the floor lobby, but it's obviously protected from the actual stairway and lift by a secondary fire door. That's completely isolated. What's your views on that? So providing a fire protected enclosure outside the front door of each flat, because we found that when you put things on the ground floor or whatever, push bikes, anything, people don't use them because they get stolen. If you bought a £3,000, £4,000, £5,000 item, and a bunch of them that are remote from you, the chance of them getting stolen are so high, people won't use them.
Yeah. And when you talk about the enclosure, Craig, is that part of the fabric of the flat, is it? Or is it at the side, or?
It's at the side, so you come outside your front door, you maybe walk 2 or 3 meters, you open up a set of double doors, there you are, that's where your wheelchair would be. If you get in your wheelchair, you would go through the other 1-hour fire door into a compartment where the lift and the stairs are. But you have 5-6 flats leading off this enclosed area, standard Part B layout.
Okay, that's interesting. I've not seen that before, but so what fire resistance?
1 hour. Well, to tell you, it's 1 hour. It's in planning at the moment. It can always go up because the drawings.
Right, okay.
I haven't done the production information yet. It's still at that planning stage. It's in planning at the moment.
All right, okay, that's interesting. I mean, I guess it's a challenge, isn't it? It's about assessing the risk, and I've not heard that before, and I don't profess to be an expert in everything, but from a policy point of view, I guess it's the balance of practicalities for the resident, especially those with mobility issues, versus what the actual risk of fire is, and I guess it's making sure the fire resistance is adequate enough that if it's right next to their escape route, if that was a lithium-ion battery fire, for example, and that impacted on them being able to get out. So, but you know, it is about trying to balance those issues and coming up with the best solutions really for that particular building. Really, does that sort of answer the question a little bit around that?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think I've got a lot of, what would I call it, wiggle room here. That I could put them up to 2 hours. I could put the door up to what. As I say, it's only planning drawings at the minute, so you can leave things that.
And would you have extraction from those?
I could put extraction in. I mean, I could put suppression. I could put any kind of fire mist systems or whatever into that enclosure where I say wheelchairs, and I'm hoping it would be ideal for anything that takes lithium, because I've seen so many where you've got push bikes in hallways, because people again spend a lot of money on these things. They have them everywhere. And I'm just looking at people not storing them in their accommodation, but have a safe place to store whatever outside the accommodation. And with a part M423, you're not guaranteed to have a wheelchair, but something, an electric bike or anything like that.
Interesting.
Good, thank you, Craig. Chris.
Good morning. I'm Chris Adair from the Northern Ireland Housing Executive. So we're a large landlord in Northern Ireland. Very unique in that Northern Ireland has a number of housing associations as well, and then we have a Northern Ireland Federation of Housing Associations. So we've all got together and tried to create a collaborative group on a best working practice for in and around how we approach this for social landlords. There's a couple of things that struck having a look through, and sorry, I want to say, Andrew and Nigel, thanks for promoting the consultation and trying to get voices into it. One thing I did notice, it fell a little shy on sort of campaigns. I know London Fire Brigade did a Charge Safe campaign, which was fantastic. I also thought a video would be useful, a video that has a resident video to show risks, that maybe is a link that landlords could use, and that is maybe non-branded, so that local landlords could put ownership to it if they wanted. But I thought that might be a useful tool in and around the consultation. So that was just a few thoughts. But
yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Chris. I mean, it's really good feedback, and I know we've had some conversations already, haven't we, about now Northern Ireland can sort of really think about and adopt that practice, because I think it's a bit of a challenge, isn't it, with some organisations, because it's not seen as the sort of go-to guidance really. So and I hope the comments around Article 50 may help with that process. But obviously, it's key about sharing, and it's really good to see you're being able to pull associations together really to sort of have that shared sort of that collaborative approach to making sure buildings are safe really.
Yeah, I guess one other thing I would have thought of would have been if the policy, and I know you've maybe already touched on it earlier, it's really related to sort of Class 1, Class 2, Class 3 vehicles, but there seems to be publications in around PLEVs, private light electric vehicles, and whether it's open to that. So obviously you could bring in e-bikes, you could bring in other things within that. So I wondered if there might have been an appetite to open it up to more things.
Yeah, I think I did have the conversation with National Fire Chiefs Council. I think the issue is that because there's different demographics in relation to those type of vehicles, I was trying to push that we have one set of guidance to cover everything, but they felt that the demographics of users was different, and with PLEV and e-bikes, e-scooters, there are other sectors that also are impacted by some of that online marketplaces, the waste industry, for example. So I think the decision was that NFCC wanted to issue separate position statements on those, but working towards trying to have that sort of consistent guidance really on how to manage the risks from those vehicles.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Chris. And I agree that getting that information out there, that awareness, raising awareness with residents about these risks is the first sort of priority, isn't it? Claire, do you want to come in next?
Yeah, thanks. I'm Claire Williams. I'm Building Safety Manager at South Essex Homes. I just wanted to learn a little bit more about the toxic vapor cloud that can develop. You mentioned that it looked like smoke, I think. So is it actually visible if it escapes? Does it travel faster than smoke, or what can
it looks like smoke. Effectively, it's a massive gas that can include the sort of toxic gases, so carbon monoxide and other types of gases. But so sometimes it can be heavier than air, sometimes it can be lighter than air, but it appears to be smoke. Or if you're watching some of the incidents where vapor clouds have occurred, it appears though it's just smoke. And the concern, obviously, with that is that vapor clouds don't always take place, but when they do, certainly with lithium-ion thermal runaway, if people, I was at the Residential Building Safety Summit yesterday, and we had a question about, well, if a lithium-ion battery goes off, should we be tackling it? What should we do? And the answer is no. You need to sort of get out as quickly as possible, shut the door behind you, and let the professionals deal with it properly. Because the reality is that when it gives off those gases, that can also create a flammable vapor cloud, which can then ignite and cause an explosion. So. And we've seen some of that, not necessarily in residential, but in other industries, like transport, for example, where batteries were being transported. And I saw a clip once of the back doors of the trailer got blown off because the fire brigade were trying. It was in America, but they were trying to tackle the incident, and they put a hole in the trailer, and it just caused it to explode. And so there are issues with it. It's a bit rare, but we wanted to sort of highlight that risk because not a lot of people know what vapor cloud explosions are, but they can be as a result of thermal runaway from batteries. And if we're talking about scooters, for example, where the batteries packed will be larger than your typical mobile phone, for example, that risk then increases, doesn't it?
Lovely, thank you.
Thanks, Claire. Dave?
Hi. Yeah, so I'm Dave Black. I work for Bristol City Council. I think me and Nigel, we've spoken before in the past, I think.
Yeah.
So I guess for about I want to say about 15 years, I've been doing mobility scooter storage. We've done in the past like community rooms. We've taken sections of community rooms where we've kind of fire rated with sort of fire doors and screens and stuff. And obviously we've done garages, but we've tried to, obviously I just wanted to share, we've smoke detectors, emergency lighting, increased ventilation. So we've done this in conjunction with building regulation, with the building officers with the council. So we had to increase a lot of ventilation. So we've taken out almost like panel doors. So we've taken out the bottom part of the panels to the double doors and actually louvered that so that there was lots of ventilation. One of the things that I've insisted on as well is we to share with people is a flashing beacon, because the last thing we want is for someone to be able to open a door, discover there's a fire, and then can't close the door. So we've tried to find a way of, if there isn't a fire alarm, like especially with garages and stuff, we've some sort of flashing beacon and stuff that indicates that there's a problem inside. So, you know, the alarm could be raised. Obviously, I just wanted to just share it. I have had some schemes where we started and then had to abandon because obviously the new Building Act came out, and we internally, so all our stores now are external. So I've just literally, so you know, anybody considering internally, I think probably maybe would probably better looking at externally, at least 6 meters away from the building. Most people who use mobility scooter use some sort of walking aid that they could use to actually get to an external and leave that there and retrieve, you know, their scooter, and then, you know, and retrieve that afterwards. So just really want to share with people, we've been doing it for about 15 years. We haven't had any fires. We we install sockets. One of the things we do is time it so that there's no charging after working hours, so no night charging. So, and we haven't had any fires at all in any of the blocks we've had, and in none of the garages and stuff. And it works quite well when we've permits. We use a permit scheme with Bristol as well for the scooters as well, so we know that people have got scooters, and we know where they are in the blocks as well. So rather than, but also we have opened it up to electric bikes and other things, you know, wheelchairs and stuff like that. So, you know, just wanted to share it with people. Just so. All right.
Brilliant. Thanks, Dave. That's really helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, excellent. Great to hear examples of best practice that are going on, Dave. Jan.
Hi. Just to go back to our colleague from Ashford, my advice would be that obviously they must have a fire risk assessor or a fire engineer involved in the construction or the planning of the site. And my suggestion is that you make sure that that person's involved, because as Dave's just talked about, you don't want a cupboard with a fire going on inside it and somebody opening up and finding something's on fire. Nor do you want smoke emerging from that shed or whatever it happens to be onto the escape route. So my suggestion would be that whoever's providing fire advice for the building itself should be part of the discussion and should be able to sign off whatever the proposal happens to be.
Thanks, Ian.
And Joyce.
Morning. Hi, Joyce Hindley from Bassett Law and Mansfield District Council. So I work as a health and safety professional, but I am also the wife of a mobility scooter user for the last 12 years. And I've just got 3 observations which are not really about fire safety. I just wanted to add to this mix. One is external storage. Batteries don't last as long in the cold. So when we personally store ours in an outhouse, but we have to heat it in the winter. Okay. Secondly, I'm just thinking about internal access. Somebody mentioned about potential new block with stores next to each flat. Just considering how people need to use a mobility scooter. In my experience with my husband, there is a sort of an element of having to work around other things, be able to back into, negotiate doorways. Small spaces are not that straightforward sometimes. And the other thing I've just say about charging overnight, I agree, charging overnight doesn't sound like a good idea, but it is what's in the guidance for the mobility scooter. So, and when you talk to somebody at the servicing place, they will say the same thing, that scooters should be left on trickle charge. So I'm just adding to the mix, really.
Brilliant. Thanks, Joyce. Appreciate those insights.
Yep. Thank you. So there is one point on a move towards sort of maybe safer battery technology, the lithium phosphate, for example. Would you agree, Andy, that there is progress around this technology, but even some of those are untested and have been known to lead to thermal runaway incidents? Of course, the big risk with all these things is all the products and all the batteries that are out there already and in use and are gradually degrading. Would you comment on that at all?
Yeah, sure. So I think there's some real challenges. There's always been challenges with scooter storage. You've got the fire safety elements on one side, you've got the resident considerations on the other. From an independence point of view and from a sort of medical point of view, everyone's different. Everyone will have different challenges. We're trying to come up with solutions that will enable safe storage. And we've seen other things like battery tech is improving all the while. On one hand, government really want to push that. We're talking about those sort of plants, energy storage systems being created, which pose different risks as well. Certainly from a fire service perspective as well, all the way through to the end user. And we have the sort of metrology bill that's now received royal assent, and government in the process of creating secondary legislation to implement that bill. But it's not the be all and end all, because there's a lot of products flooding online marketplaces. You can go online and you can buy a really unsafe charger or a battery that's not UKCA tested, hasn't gone through the same protocols, and some of them, they won't even have the right components in them that prevent fires from occurring in the first place. So there's a real challenge there around that, and tech's building up, the user requirements developing, because especially on the e-bike and e-scooter front, people want to do things quicker, faster. The devices have taken off, especially with the younger population. You can buy conversion kits for like 100 quid. To have it done professionally, you're talking 600-700 quid to have that conversion done correctly. So there's a real challenge there, isn't there, about the cost of that, and we're still in a cost of living crisis. All of these issues sort of are thrown into the mix, and so I don't think standards have kept up. I'm not just talking about mobility scooter guidance here. Standards are not keeping pace with the improvements in technology, and sort of government will really got to get a grip on that. But as an industry as well, we've also got to sort of share, learn, recognize that one solution won't fit everything, and that we will have to flex to do that. So I don't have all of the answers, but I hope that by sort of starting to raise that awareness, trying to make sure the guidance is as useful as possible, recognizing it won't cover all circumstances, but feedback's great because we can then try and make it a better document for everyone concerned. Really,
that's good. No, it's the controls on sale of new equipment will certainly help, won't it? But I think there's still a big gap around what happens post sale, whether it's just natural degradation of the battery, physical damage through normal use, or actual abuse and mistreatment, people modifying them. A very typical scenario, as Joyce raised, about batteries failing due to cold weather. Somebody could unwittingly, I need a new battery. I go online and get a new battery, and for some reason it's not compatible with the charger if it's not an original, manufacturer's component, and that's a risk which could happen, very easily in any of our buildings. I think some points about any resources that we can share around raising awareness. So the thing that you guys are using. If you're happy to sort of share links in the chat, I'm sure that would be appreciated by everyone. I'm not sure we've got time to cover all of these, but we'll try and all the questions, but we'll try and pick them up later. Chris,
Yeah, I think.
Sorry, Andy, you go.
Sorry, Nigel. Yeah, I was just going to say Chris has got his hand up. So over to you, Chris.
It was just a very quick question. It was actually for Dave Black there that I see is still on. Hiya, Dave. Thanks for sharing that. I wanted to just ask, did the building safety regulator reject your current installations or proposals within HRBs, and that's why you moved to external storage? I was just interested in what you said there.
Yeah. Basically, we it was something that we were considering because we did a lot of community rooms and stuff for that. It was just the fact that we decided that we thought that anything we do, we'd have to risk assess it properly, really look at the. So we really just got together and just decided, really, and management as well decided that anything we did from, I think it was 2024, would just literally be external. We wouldn't look at anything internally. We would look at external. It's funny. There's a scheme I've just done, and I actually created 2 different areas. This is in Brislington in Bristol, Gilton House. So I've installed a double garage, a precast concrete double garage. There were 2 garages that were falling down and they had to be replaced. So we replaced these. Normally the garages I normally do a double garage, so we've done I've installed a garage. I've put 2 lots of doors in. So there's some double doors, which there's a single leaf which is 900 wide, and then there's another small door which is 400. So you can open it up so you can actually get into the door. These are manual doors which we've suited, and then I've put a automatic roller shutter up, which is I think it's 5 foot wide. So it's the first time I've ever done an automatic roller shutter, which was remote controlled, and it's got a key switch as well. We don't mark out the lines in the garages, so we just literally we installed the garage, put 9 sockets in, spaced them out. We put emergency lights in, smoke detector, the flashing beacon and stuff on the garage. Signed it up with escape notices and all the rest of its pieces. And then what I've done through metroSTOR, we've
scoring my debut, but I think they put 60 on us. And that was 2013, and I think Grixie actually tore his.
Yeah. Sorry. So I was going to say, through metroSTOR, we've put 3 units outside a block of flats. And the reason why we've done it, we've put no electric in there. It's purely because we had a resident that literally, where we had the garages, clearly right from day one, said they couldn't walk to the garages. So we've literally, it's 6 meters away from the building, but we haven't put any electric in it because it's the roof of building staggered, and it's the roof of some shops. So we've literally just made a decision, said, look, we can actually put storage there, but we won't put any electric in it. She's currently, she charges her scooter once a month. She doesn't, it's a small use, and we've risk assessed that. She charges it once a month, but she stores it outside in that shed, and she can actually get to it. So it's 3 units. metroSTOR have provided them for us. So yeah, it was just something that we decided we were going to do. We wouldn't create anymore. It was just one of these things moving forward. We just didn't think it was safe enough for us to still carry. I actually started. It was an old warden office, which had external 2 doors to the outside. I started, but what happened? The entrance got blocked by scaffolding for cladding removal. After and because of what happened, they were still waiting decisions and stuff. So it dragged on for about 2 years. So that never got finished off. We cleared it, painted it, never got, and then we just walked away from it. We abandoned it. And there are another couple of sites across the city to which I've taken out tenant storage. We had cages in 2 rooms, two blocks of flats, multi-stories, ground floor. We cleared the cages out, the metal cages out, cleared it, painted it, didn't go as far as putting electric sockets in, and we walked away from those as well. So yeah, so it's yeah.
Brilliant. Thanks, Dave. I think what we'll do is we'll get you connected up after the session. But just a last thank you to everyone for listening and for all the feedback and the questions. It's been really, really positive. Lots to take away, and I'll make sure that those comments are reflected in the consultation when I meet with the National Fire Chiefs Council shortly. And just to say that, you know, if you're not a member of the fire group, check out firesafetyinhousing.org.uk. It's free to sign up, so please carry on that conversation. And if you've got any good practice or you've been doing some fantastic stuff, or you want to just share that with others, drop us an email to scooters@shfsg.info, and we will try and join everyone up together on that. And just a massive thank you to Nigel as well for hosting this excellent sort of session today. Thanks, Nigel. That's you.
Thank you, Andy. No, I really appreciate what you put into this, and appreciate everybody's time for joining and contributions. Please keep the conversation going, feedback as much as you can, and share links on what you're doing, the best practice, etc. Resources you're using, really valuable, really appreciated. Thank you much, everybody. Have a great day.